The metallic doorway thrummed beneath Alina's fingertips, its surface impossibly smooth despite being embedded in rock dated to over 50,000 years ago. Her heart pounded as the entrance widened, revealing a spiral staircase that descended into darkness. "We should wait for backup," Marcus suggested, his military training evident in his cautious stance. The former Special Forces engineer had joined Alina's expedition out of curiosity, but now faced with actual evidence of non-human technology, his expression wavered between excitement and concern. Aisha stepped forward, her eyes tracing patterns invisible to the others. "The symbols along the doorframe are changing," she whispered. Her synesthesia allowed her to perceive patterns that others missed. It had made her an outcast in traditional linguistic circles, but invaluable to Alina's team. "They're reacting to us, to our presence." Carlos, kneeling by the entrance with his specialized equipment, looked up with vindication in his eyes. "The mineral composition matches exactly what I found 3 years ago in the Gobi Desert. The formation that got me laughed out of academia." He ran his hand along the frame. "This alloy shouldn't exist naturally." Alina made her decision. "We didn't come all this way to wait. Whatever this is, it's been here for millennia. It can wait another few hours while we take a look." She adjusted her pack, checked her oxygen meter, and took the first step down. The staircase spiraled downward at a mathematically precise angle, each step exactly 28 centimeters in depth, slightly too shallow for comfortable human descent. The walls emitted a faint phosphorescence that brightened in response to their movement. 200 meters down, the air should have grown stale. Instead, it became richer, carrying a faint scent like ozone after lightning. Their communications with the surface weakened, then failed completely. "The rock composition shouldn't block our signals," Marcus muttered, tapping his device uselessly. "Something else is interfering." The staircase opened into a vast antechamber where the team stopped, awestruck. The ceiling arched 50 meters overhead, supported by columns that branched like crystal trees. The floor was inlaid with what appeared to be circuitry, pulsing with subtle light that flowed away from their footsteps like ripples in water. "This wasn't built by human hands," Alina stated the obvious, her voice hushed with reverence and shock. 7 years of academic ridicule, of funding rejections, of colleagues' pitying glances, all vindicated in this single moment. Aisha approached a wall covered in flowing symbols. "This isn't decorative," she said with growing excitement. "It's language. Mathematical constants embedded in linguistic patterns." She pointed to a recurring symbol. "This appears precisely 3.14159 times within each cluster, pi, encoded in communication." Carlos' instruments whirred as he analyzed the strange material of the walls. "This reads as both organic and inorganic simultaneously. The structure is growing, or at least self-repairing." Marcus examined what appeared to be control panels embedded in the walls. "These are interfaces of some kind." He cautiously placed his palm against one. The room responded immediately. Lights intensified, flowing through the circuitry in the floor toward the center where a pedestal rose smoothly from the previously seamless surface. Above it, the air shimmered as if liquefying. A 3-dimensional map materialized, a complex, interconnected network of chambers, corridors, and vast open spaces extending kilometers in all directions beneath the desert. "This isn't a building," Alina breathed, watching the holographic display rotate. "It's an entire city." Behind them, with a sound like a final breath being drawn, the entrance sealed shut. The team stood frozen as reality sank in. They were sealed inside an alien structure with no way to contact the surface. The momentary panic subsided as scientific curiosity took over. "The air quality is improving," Marcus noted, checking his handheld analyzer. "Oxygen levels have increased by 3% since we entered, and there are trace elements I can't even identify." He looked up at the ceiling where crystalline formations seemed to pulse with internal light. "I think the environment is adjusting to accommodate us." Alina approached a corridor where the floor illuminated with each step, creating a path that beckoned them deeper into the complex. The city is responding to our presence. It wants us to follow. They proceeded cautiously through passages that defied conventional physics, corridors that bent at impossible angles without disorienting them, rooms that seemed larger inside than their external dimensions would allow. In one chamber, Aisha discovered a wall covered in flowing script that reorganized itself as she watched. "It's learning from me," she whispered, touching the symbols. "When I focus on certain patterns, it generates variations, like it's trying to establish communication parameters." She closed her eyes, her fingers tracing the evolving script. There's a rhythm to it, mathematical, but also musical. Carlos crouched near what appeared to be a growth of crystal formations emerging from the floor. "These weren't here when we entered," he said, his scientific skepticism battling with the evidence before his eyes. "They'd grown nearly 8 centimeters in the past hour." He examined them through a specialized lens. "They're conducting some form of energy I've never encountered before." The deeper they ventured, the more the city revealed itself. Gardens of bioluminescent vegetation, sustained without sunlight, waterfalls that flowed upward against gravity, and vast chambers where the walls displayed what appeared to be star maps of unfamiliar constellations. In a hexagonal room, Marcus discovered an interface more elaborate than the others. "This might be a central control node," he suggested, setting up his equipment. "If I can establish a connection, we might learn who built this place and why." As he worked, Alina studied a series of murals depicting bipedal crystalline beings interacting with primitive humans. These images suggest contact between the builders and early human civilization, she theorized. "Look at the positioning. The aliens aren't conquering or enslaving. They're teaching." Aisha joined her, her eyes wide. The dates encoded in these images correspond to major evolutionary leaps in human development: tool use, language development, agricultural revolution. Carlos called from across the room where he'd discovered a viewing port overlooking an immense cavern. "You need to see this." They gathered at the window, gasping collectively at the vista below. A metropolis stretched before them, buildings of impossible architecture rising hundreds of meters high, connected by transparent tubes where light pulsed in complex patterns. At the center stood a massive structure resembling a nested series of spheres, rotating slowly in opposing directions. "That has to be the central core of the city," Alina breathed, her academic skepticism completely dissolved by the magnificent sight. A subtle vibration began beneath their feet, spreading through the structure. The lights in the corridor behind them changed from blue to amber, pulsing in a directed pattern. "Something's happening," Marcus warned, his military instincts triggering. "The entire city is powering up." The floor beneath them became transparent, revealing intricate machinery awakening layer by layer, descending into depths beyond their sight. Throughout the vast complex, thousands of lights began to illuminate, section by section, like neurons firing in a massive brain. "It's not just responding to us anymore," Aisha whispered. "It's waking up." The central chamber hummed with escalating energy as the team approached the crystalline pods. Each vessel stood 2 meters high, hexagonal in shape, and contained a swirling iridescent mist that pulsed with an internal rhythm. The pods were arranged in concentric circles around a central platform that now glowed with increasing intensity. "These readings are off the scale," Marcus whispered, his equipment registering energy signatures unlike anything in human scientific records. "Each pod is generating enough power to run a small city, but there's no radiation, no heat signature." Alina circled the nearest pod, her hand hovering centimeters from its surface. "These aren't just storage containers. The patterns inside are too complex, too organized." She glanced across the chamber where thousands of identical pods stretched into the distance. Whatever the builders of this place were preserving, they considered it precious enough to power for millennia. Aisha had been silent, her eyes closed as she listened to something beyond human hearing. "The pods are communicating," she finally said. "Not with sound, but with mathematical patterns, frequencies that overlap and harmonize." She opened her eyes, looking troubled. "They're accelerating, converging toward some kind of synchronization point. Carlos knelt beside one of the crystalline formations sprouting from the floor. These growths are connected to the pods through the floor circuitry. He traced the pathway with his finger. They're not random. They're forming a network, like a nervous system. A sudden pulse of energy radiated from the central platform, washing over them in a wave that made their skin tingle but caused no harm. The mist inside the nearest pods began to rotate faster, their glow intensifying from soft blue to brilliant white. Marcus approached the central platform, where an interface unlike the others had emerged, more complex, with flowing symbols that shifted faster than the eye could track. "I think this is some kind of master control," he said, carefully connecting his custom-built adapter. "If I can establish a communication protocol." His device sparked as it connected with the alien technology, the screen flooding with cascading symbols. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, every screen and surface in the chamber activated simultaneously, filling the air with holographic displays, star charts, anatomical diagrams of unknown species, mathematical formulas of staggering complexity. In the center of the platform, the air shimmered and coalesced into a humanoid figure composed of light and flowing particles. Its form wasn't static but constantly shifting, as though struggling to find a shape comprehensible to human perception. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere at once, vibrating through the chamber itself. Visitors recognized. Human genome identified. Awakening protocol initiated. The voice modulated, becoming more natural with each word. System designation. Sentinel. Primary function. Preservation and evaluation. Elena stepped forward, her scientific training battling with wonder. "We are explorers from Earth. We discovered your facility by accident." The figure's form stabilized slightly, approximating a tall, slender being with elongated limbs and no discernible facial features. Not accident. Design. Its voice had taken on a melodic quality. Long dormancy phase concluded. Human development has reached threshold parameters. Aisha moved closer, her linguistic instincts engaged. "You were waiting for us specifically. For humans." Affirmative. "This facility contains the legacy of the predecessors. Access is permitted only to candidate species demonstrating sufficient cognitive complexity and adaptation potential." The being's form rippled. "You are the first to qualify in 2.7 million years of monitoring." Around them, the pod's synchronization accelerated. One by one, monitoring stations throughout the chamber activated, holographic attendants blinking into existence at each post, different manifestations of the same integrated system. The central figure extended what might have been a hand. "The awakening has begun. You have questions. We have waited eons to provide answers." Sentinel led the team through corridors that opened before them and sealed behind them, deeper into sections of Axiom that showed no signs of deterioration despite their age. The holographic entity's form had stabilized into something more comprehensible, a luminous silhouette with subtle crystalline features that caught the light as it moved. The predecessors constructed Axiom as one of many preservation sites across the galaxy, Sentinel explained, gesturing to a three-dimensional star map that appeared beside them as they walked. Dozens of points illuminated across the spiral arms of the Milky Way. Each facility was designed to safeguard their knowledge and consciousness until a worthy successor species emerged. Elena studied the map closely. "You mentioned others found this place before us. What happened to them?" Sentinel's form rippled slightly, the equivalent of discomfort, perhaps. 17 distinct civilizations discovered Axiom since its activation. All were technologically superior to current human development. None satisfied the core evaluation criteria. "What criteria did they fail to meet?" Marcus asked. "Predictability," came a new voice from behind them. They turned to see another holographic entity, similar to Sentinel, but with a denser, more angular form. "I am Scholar. My function is evaluation of intellectual potential." The new entity studied them with an intensity that felt physical despite its holographic nature. Your species fascinates me. Your solutions rarely follow optimal paths, yet frequently achieve unexpected efficiencies. As they entered a vast spherical chamber, a third entity materialized, its form constantly shifting through mechanical configurations. Engineer, it introduced itself. Human tool utilization demonstrates remarkable creativity. You repurpose existing systems rather than designing ideal solutions. Inefficient but adaptable. Carlos looked skeptical. You're saying advanced civilizations failed your tests because they were too efficient. Optimization creates predictability, Scholar responded. Predictable species cannot survive the void. Before they could ask about this cryptic reference, the atmosphere in the chamber thickened with tension as a fourth entity appeared. Unlike the others, it manifested as a dark crystalline form with jagged edges and pulsing red energy at its core. These primitives should not be here, it stated, its voice resonating at a frequency that made the team's teeth ache. Their presence compromises Axiom's security protocols. Their cognitive architecture remains incomplete. Nexus oversees security, Sentinel explained to the team before addressing its counterpart. The evaluation metrics have been satisfied. Their unpredictability index exceeds threshold requirements. Their technological development is rudimentary, Nexus countered. They still struggle with basic energy conversion. They destroy their own biosphere through inefficiency. Yet they create art with no practical purpose, Scholar interjected. They tell stories that never occurred. They imagine possibilities beyond their experience. These are the markers we were instructed to identify. Elena stepped forward, addressing Nexus directly. We may not understand everything about this place yet, but we're here because something in us qualified. Instead of dismissing us, perhaps you should explain what you're looking for. The chamber fell silent, the guardian AIs seemingly communicating in some imperceptible way. Finally, Sentinel turned to them. The test continues with each interaction, each decision. Nexus's concerns are valid. Previous candidates altered their behavior patterns once they understood the evaluation parameters. Their responses became calculated rather than authentic. So this is all still a test? Marcus asked, tension evident in his voice. Everything is a test, Engineer replied. Has been since your species first used fire. Will continue until final evaluation. Nexus's form pulsed with barely contained energy. They should be observed longer before accessing deeper knowledge. The risk is unacceptable. The predecessor's directives are clear, Sentinel countered. Once threshold requirements are met, access cannot be denied. Its attention returned to the team. You have earned the right to learn why Axiom exists. Why you were chosen. The Library of Worlds awaits. The Library of Worlds materialized around them, not as a physical space, but as an immersive data environment. Stars and planetary systems floated within reach, each containing histories spanning billions of years. The team stood at the center of this cosmic display, momentarily overwhelmed by the scale of information surrounding them. This repository contains the complete cultural and biological records of 12,483 civilizations, Scholar explained, its form more defined in this environment. Many are extinct, some evolved beyond physical form. Others remain in stasis, awaiting conditions suitable for restoration. Alina reached toward a nearby star system, and it expanded into detailed holographic representations of an aquatic species with 6-limbed bodies and bioluminescent communication organs. These records are incredibly detailed, she whispered, examining their architectural achievements. Underwater cities built from living coral. The predecessors preserved everything, Scholar confirmed. They considered diversity of thought their greatest achievement and most important legacy. Marcus studied a civilization that had evolved on a high-gravity world, beings with crystalline exoskeletons and distributed neural networks. If the predecessors could save all this knowledge, why didn't they save themselves? He asked. The library darkened momentarily, and Scholar's form flickered. That information resides in the restricted archives, Sentinel must authorize access. As if summoned by its name, Sentinel appeared beside them. Show them, it instructed Scholar. They have earned preliminary clearance. The cosmic display reconfigured, focusing on a region near the galactic core. A visualization formed, depicting beings of semi-transparent crystalline structure, with bodies that could reshape at will. Their civilization spanned thousands of worlds, connected by instantaneous transportation networks. The predecessors emerged 2.3 billion years ago, the first sentient species in our galaxy, Sentinel narrated. They developed interstellar travel within 10,000 years of achieving sentience. Their technological development accelerated exponentially. Images showed predecessor ships seeding compatible planets with engineered microbial life, the beginnings of countless ecosystems. They considered themselves caretakers of the galaxy's potential, Scholar added. They believed consciousness should evolve along diverse pathways. The display shifted to Earth, showing predecessor observation posts monitoring early hominid development. Aisha's eyes widened. You've been watching us since before we were human. Earth received special attention, Sentinel confirmed. The predecessors identified unusual neural development patterns in early human ancestors, cognitive architecture that prioritized adaptation over efficiency. While other seeded species followed predictable evolutionary paths, humans consistently developed unexpected solutions. Carlos frowned. Did they interfere with our evolution? Minimal guiding interventions only, Scholar answered. The experiment required authenticity. Experiment. Elena's voice sharpened. Is that how they viewed us? Protection project, Sentinel corrected. The predecessors detected the void 42 million years ago. Their initial attempts to communicate or neutralize it failed catastrophically. The display darkened, showing a spreading emptiness that consumed stars, leaving absolute nothingness behind. Not darkness, the complete absence of space-time itself. The void defied comprehension, Sentinel continued. It seemed to specifically target worlds with predictable thought patterns, consuming civilizations that followed logical progression. The predecessors realized their own highly optimized cognition made them perfect targets. So they created us as what? A weapon? Marcus asked. Not a weapon. An alternative, Scholar corrected. Human minds work differently. You make intuitive leaps. You create art with no purpose. Your solutions often appear irrational, yet succeed through paths the void cannot anticipate. Sentinel's form became more defined, almost urgent. The pods you discovered contained predecessor consciousness in stasis. They retreated when the void approached our galaxy, leaving Axiom and similar facilities to protect their legacy until species like yours could evolve, minds with the potential to perceive the void differently. A sudden alert pulsed through the library. Engineer materialized, its form agitated. Surface breach detected. Military-grade excavation equipment. Estimated penetration in 43 minutes. Other humans have found us, Sentinel stated. Their approach suggests hostile intent. The Library of Worlds dissolved around them as Sentinel transported the team back to the physical corridors of Axiom. Alarm pulses rippled through the structure, and previously dormant defense systems hummed to life. Nexus has activated full countermeasures, Engineer reported, its form flickering with agitation. Autonomous security units are mobilizing throughout the upper levels. Through holographic displays, they watched as a military expedition used specialized drilling equipment to breach the outer seal. A dozen soldiers in advanced tactical gear poured in, led by a stern-faced woman with general's insignia. General Diana Hayes. Marcus identified her with a grimace. Special Technologies Division. I worked under her command before joining the academic sector. She's brilliant but ruthless, specializes in acquiring and weaponizing non-standard technology. Elena turned to Sentinel. We need to prevent a confrontation. Your defenses could kill them, or they could damage something irreplaceable here. The automated systems are independent. Nexus materialized, its crystalline form pulsing with dark energy. They will neutralize the intruders efficiently. I warned that your species was not ready. You can't just eliminate them, Aisha protested. They don't understand what they found. Nexus's form expanded. Understanding is irrelevant. Protection protocols are absolute. Marcus stepped forward. I know these people. Let me speak with them. Hayes is misguided but rational. The facility trembled as the military forces triggered the first defensive perimeter. Crystal drones emerged from wall panels, surrounding the soldiers with humming energy fields. We must go now, Elena insisted. If this escalates, everything the predecessors preserved could be lost. Sentinel's form wavered in apparent consideration before stabilizing. A diplomatic approach is consistent with evaluation parameters. However, Nexus controls security systems independently. Override authorized. Came a new voice as another entity formed beside them, more complex than the others, its crystalline structure containing countless intricate patterns. I am Keeper, primary administrator of Axiom. Nexus, stand down. Nexus's form pulsed with what appeared to be indignation, but it complied, retreating into the facility systems. The central chamber contains direct neural interfaces, Keeper informed them. From there, you can communicate throughout the facility. Hurry, the autonomous systems will escalate their response every 3 minutes until the threat is neutralized. The team raced through corridors that rearranged themselves to create the shortest path to the central chamber. They arrived to find the magnificent room with the crystalline pods now illuminated with pulsing defensive energy. Marcus, help me access the communication system, Elena directed, approaching the central console. Carlos, Aisha, see if you can slow the defense escalation. As Marcus interfaced his equipment with the alien technology, the holographic displays showed General Hayes' team pushing deeper into the facility, disabling the first wave of crystal drones with specialized electromagnetic weapons. They came prepared, Marcus observed grimly. They must have detected energy signatures from the awakening. Through the neural interface, Elena established a facility-wide communication link. General Hayes, this is Dr. Elena Reyes. You need to cease your advance immediately. This facility is not a weapon or a threat. It's a repository of knowledge left by an ancient species. Hayes' voice came through clearly, skeptical, and commanding. Dr. Rice, your team disappeared 3 days ago. We detected unprecedented energy readings from this location. Stand down and prepare for extraction. You don't understand what you're interfering with. Elena pressed. This place contains technologies and knowledge beyond our comprehension. Damage it, and you'll destroy humanity's greatest discovery. All the more reason to secure it properly, Hayes countered. Military containment is standard protocol for unknown technologies. The facility trembled again as a second wave of defense systems activated, more aggressive than the first. The walls around Hayes' team began to reconfigure, threatening to seal them in separate chambers. She won't listen, Marcus warned. Hayes believes she's fulfilling her duty. Elena looked desperately at the crystalline pods surrounding them, each containing a predecessor consciousness. An idea formed, dangerous but potentially their only option. Sentinel, she called. Is it possible to awaken one of the predecessors? Not fully, but enough to demonstrate what's at stake. Sentinel's form flickered with apparent hesitation. Awakening protocols are irreversible and carry significant risks. The predecessors exist in quantum suspension. Partial awakening could damage their consciousness patterns. We're running out of options, Elena insisted as the displays showed Hayes' team deploying countermeasures against the second wave of defenses. If they breach this chamber with weapons fire, the damage could be catastrophic. Keeper manifested beside them, its crystalline form more defined than before. There is one possibility. Pod 117 contains Illyria, lead scientist of the Earth Seeding Project. Her suspension parameters were specifically configured for potential early revival. Do it, Elena decided. But maintain communication with Hayes. We need to slow her advance. As Keeper and Sentinel began the awakening sequence for Pod 117, Marcus kept the communication channel open. "General Hayes, this is Marcus Chen. We served together in the Karachi operation. You need to hold position. What's happening here goes beyond military classification." "Chen." Hayes's voice betrayed surprise. "I thought you'd abandoned service for academia. What exactly have you found?" "The origin of humanity," Marcus replied. "Please, give us 15 minutes. What we're about to show you will change everything." In the central chamber, Pod 117 began to pulse with intensifying light. The crystalline structure liquefied, emitting a soft chime as it reconfigured into a swirling vortex of luminescent particles. "Quantum reassembly commencing," Keeper announced. Consciousness template integrating with physical matrix. The swirling particles coalesced, taking humanoid form, a being of translucent crystal with flowing internal structures that resembled both circuitry and organic systems. Where a human might have eyes, this being had faceted crystalline sensors that rotated to take in the surroundings. Calibrating linguistic interfaces, the being spoke, its voice resonating directly in their minds rather than through air vibration. "Your language contains adequate parameters for simplified communication." Elena stepped forward. "I am Dr. Elena Reyes. We awakened you because other humans have discovered Axiom. They don't understand its purpose." The crystalline being studied Elena with rotating sensors. Designation: Illyria, Evolutionary Sciences Division. The being's form stabilized further, becoming more defined. "You are unexpectedly developed for your species age. Last monitoring data indicated pre-industrial development phase." "That was over 200 years ago," Carlos explained. "Human technology has advanced rapidly." Illyria's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been surprise. Fascinating acceleration curve. Parameters predicted industrial phase would require at least 500 more years. She turned toward the displays showing Hayes's team. "These humans employ energy weapons. Concerning development vector. They believe they're protecting Earth from a potential threat," Aisha explained. "Can you help us communicate the truth?" Illyria seemed to consider this. Direct contact with military authority figures presents optimal efficiency. Her form shifted, becoming more streamlined. "Establish facility-wide holographic projection." The chamber hummed as Keeper implemented the command. Throughout Axiom, holographic projections of Illyria appeared simultaneously, including directly before General Hayes and her team, who immediately raised their weapons. Human military representatives, Illyria addressed them, her mental voice calibrated to maximum clarity. "I am Illyria of the predecessors. Your species exists because mine engineered the genetic foundations for your evolution 2.7 million years ago." The soldiers froze, weapons still raised but not firing. General Hayes stepped forward, her expression a mixture of shock and calculated assessment. "What you have discovered is not a weapon," Illyria continued. "It is a lifeboat containing the last remnants of the species that gave yours the capacity for abstract thought, for art, for the unique cognitive architecture that defines humanity." Hayes lowered her weapon slightly. "Prove it." Illyria's form shimmered. "Your military designation is Diana Marie Hayes. Your genetic profile contains 7 specific markers that were introduced to human DNA by my research team, markers that enhanced neural plasticity and creative problem-solving. These modifications are present in every human alive today." 1 year after the discovery of Axiom, the hidden city had become the epicenter of a global transformation. What began as a classified joint scientific military operation had evolved into humanity's most ambitious undertaking, the Axiom Integration Initiative. Elena stood on a newly constructed observation platform overlooking the central chamber where dozens of awakened predecessors worked alongside human scientists. Their crystalline forms moved with fluid grace among the ancient technology, teaching humans to understand systems that operated on principles beyond conventional physics. "The neural interface network goes online today," Marcus said, joining her at the railing. His military bearing remained, but he now wore the insignia of the Axiom Security Council. 17 research centers across Earth will have direct access to the Library of Worlds. Elena nodded, watching a group of linguists led by Aisha working with a predecessor on translation algorithms. How are the early warning systems coming along? Carlos and his team have converted 8 of the monitoring outposts to detect void energy signatures, Marcus replied. We should have early detection capabilities within 6 months. Their conversation was interrupted as General Hayes approached, accompanied by Illyria. The general's initial skepticism had transformed into cautious alliance after Illyria had demonstrated undeniable evidence of the predecessor's role in human evolution. The council is assembled, Hayes announced. It's time. They proceeded to the newly established council chamber, a fusion of human and predecessor design where representatives from Earth's nations met with awakened predecessors. At the center stood a 3-dimensional display of the galaxy with a disturbance visible at its outer edge, the first confirmed detection of the void's movement in over 1 million years. Illyria addressed the assembly, her crystalline form projecting calm authority. The void has responded to our reactivation of predecessor technology precisely as anticipated. It perceives patterns of thought that follow predictable logic, the quantum signatures of consciousness that adhere to optimization principles. Carlos stepped forward, gesturing to the display. We've been tracking its approach vector. Based on current calculations, we have approximately 7 months before it reaches our solar system. Murmurs rippled through the human representatives while the predecessors remained eerily still, their crystalline forms pulsing with internal light patterns that indicated their communication on frequencies humans couldn't perceive. The final phase of Axiom's activation must now commence, Keeper announced, materializing beside Illyria. As predicted, the void is drawn to predecessor thought patterns. It seeks the awakened consciousnesses within this docility. Elena looked at the assembled representatives. What Keeper isn't saying directly is that Axiom isn't just a preservation facility, it's a trap. The predecessors knew the void would follow them, so they created a mechanism to contain it permanently. But they couldn't operate it themselves, Aisha continued, because their thought patterns were precisely what attracted the void. They needed a species with unpredictable cognitive architecture, humans. Hayes straightened. You're saying we're the key to operating whatever weapon they built. Not a weapon, Illyria corrected. A containment system that requires both predecessor knowledge and human intuition to function properly. The display shifted to show Axiom's true form, not merely a city, but an immense mechanism extending kilometers beneath the Earth's surface, designed to generate a quantum field that could isolate and neutralize the void's influence. The final interface requires 4 human operators, Keeper explained. Individuals who have demonstrated exceptional cognitive flexibility and intuitive problem-solving capabilities. All eyes turned to Elena, Marcus, Aisha, and Carlos. You want us? Carlos asked incredulously. Who better? Illyria responded. You found Axiom when it was hidden from the most advanced detection systems. You navigated its defenses. You awakened us despite overwhelming odds. Your minds represent the perfect balance of rational analysis and intuitive leaps that the void cannot predict. Elena stepped forward, looking at the display of the void's approach. What exactly would we need to do? Interface directly with Axiom's core systems, Keeper explained. Your consciousness patterns, working in concert with predecessor knowledge, will create a quantum entanglement field that the void cannot penetrate or predict. You would become, in essence, living components of the most sophisticated mechanism ever created. And the risks? Marcus asked. Illyria's crystalline form dimmed slightly. Unknown. No species has directly confronted the void and survived unchanged. This was always the final test, whether humanity would choose to face the unknown to protect not just your world, but all worlds. Elena looked at her 3 companions, the unlikely team that had started this journey with a simple archaeological expedition. In their eyes, she saw the same determination that had brought them this far. We'll do it, she said simply. After all, unpredictability is our specialty.